Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm, and you are watching fourth and final part of What If Naruto Becomes No Life King. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Now, wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Naruto sat still on the lid of his coffin and looked at the candle on the table in front of him. It was a small thing, and the fact that it was the only thing on the table made it seem even smaller. His eyes went to the wick of the candle he was holding. Part of him kept thinking about what had happened in the last few days and wondering what he should do. Itachi's return as a prisoner was kept a secret, and everyone there had to take an oath of silence about both Itachi and Naruto's secret and mission. The no-life prince was currently waiting in the cells near the room where he would be questioned. This is standard procedure. Hinata seemed a little more distant after she saw what Naruto was really like when they were fighting. This was especially true when it came to her being a vampire and her growing sexuality. From what he knew, she had done something rash and stupid right before they left for the mission. Kiba seemed to be afraid of the beast Naruto turned into when fighting. They hadn't talked much since the mission, but Kiba could tell that the Inuzuka was a little upset. Maybe they were acting up the night after the fight, or maybe they were too afraid to tell him. He thought again about the fight he and Itachi had, and he looked again at the lit candle. He said to himself, I walk the line, and I pay for it. He knew Weedabra was upstairs with her lovers and couldn't hear him because she was too far away. I am neither a monster nor a person. Suna might have had a different ending if he had chosen a side. He was sent as a diplomatic envoy, which was Tsunade's way of saying that he was to look into the minds of the Suna Council to make sure they weren't working with Orochimaru because of the upcoming exams. They hadn't, or at least they hadn't done it on purpose. Since Orochimaru was a good actor and the real Kazekage was dead, there was no one to tell him he was lying. Until Naruto walked in and started reading everyone's minds. It caught him by surprise to actually feel Orochimaru's twisted genius, and that was all the snake needed. Even though Naruto didn't know how, it seemed like Orochimaru had made a seal that gave off a light that was the same as strong sunlight. He turned on all of them, which blinded the vampire and, to the vampire's surprise, burned him a little. The snake then cut him with the kusanagi several times before running away. The silver blade of the sword was what made it burn, but Naruto could feel that the metal was also a blessing. Naruto didn't know how he had made any of these, but he knew it was a test of his little inventions, and they had passed. He hadn't even been able to give chase. Even if he had gotten out of the room in time, it was still midday in a desert. It hurt his pride that he had to leave the room and go into the dark to lick his wounds until nightfall. Then he had to go back to Konoha and tell him that Orochimaru had failed. It also looked like Suna wouldn't be taking the exams because Orochimaru had set off a lot of explosives as he ran away, destroying most of the west half of Suna, and they needed to fix the damage. Naruto muttered, he's given this some thought. As he looked back at the burned wick in his hands. By the time he was done with his report, Tsunade already had a plan. This year, Team 8 wasn't going to take the Chunin exams. Hinata and Kiba were going to stay with their clans instead. Naruto was supposed to change his appearance and follow Sasuke as an Anbu. When Orochimaru came, Naruto was to attack him. The rest of the village had to always be ready for war. He asked out loud, but what does it take to kill him? Alucard says it takes a man to kill a monster, but what is a monster? What am I? He reached out and moved the other candle next to the one that was already lit. Do I turn into a man in order to kill the monster and die? Do I have to turn into a monster to kill a man and stay alive? In this battle, there was no time to think about what to do. He would leave it as either Sarah's Victoria's legacy or Count Dracula's legacy. Inside Naruto's head. At this point, her life was just one annoying thing after another. First, it was sealed inside a person, and it was an infant. The second thing was that she couldn't break the seal and get out. She was very angry that she had to lose twice to the same person, who was also dead. Then the plan to harm the child came to mind. It seemed like a good plan. When he had no other way to find his way, whispers would gently lead him in the direction she wanted, without anyone finding out until it was too late. As time went on, she came up with a plan for what to do after she was freed. She would finish destroying the village and then go back to patrolling her territory like she did before the humans made her angry. Part of it was anger and part of it was a kind of maternal fury. She had never taken a mate and didn't really want one, and she didn't think the boy was related to her in any way, but she was still angry at the humans for being stupid and beating a child. The plan to corrupt was over when Naruto found Alucard. He became way too stubborn. He wasn't always sure where he was going, but he had a strong will. In a moment of anger, she flooded Naruto with her own chakra. Luckily, this happened when Naruto was losing and was willing to accept any help. She could see through his eyes when she was in the berserker state, but her other senses were dulled because the state was new to her. After that, her new goal was to get him into more berserker states, which she might be able to use to get away. Even though she couldn't run away with them, they still gave her some freedom. But after a few years, he started acting very strangely. If she wasn't wrong, it had been about a year since he killed the woman who had given birth to his daughter without his permission. He had always treated her with calm respect. He knew how powerful she was, and he also knew that she wasn't a threat to him unless he made her one. Then, it changed in a strange way. It was still polite, but it had a curious edge to it. After another year, he started to act more like a child around her, as long as he was in a good mood. And what did he mean by faith? She asked herself, thinking again about what he had said at the festival. She thought at the time that they meant she was his backup plan. He had said it again when she criticized him after the fight with Orochimaru, but it didn't seem like the right definition anymore. Weedabra, who was never helpful, made fun of it by saying things like how obvious it should be. Then someone would say something about how dark it must be for her to always have her eyes closed. Naruto had become a bit of a mystery to her lately. She didn't like him in many ways. There were times when she thought she liked him. She didn't know what to say about him sometimes. If he had been a demon and had been given enough time to grow up, he could have become a real terror and maybe even a good choice for a mate. The children of such a union would be strong for sure. She shook those thoughts out of her head because she didn't like where they were going. It was a lot easier and simpler to just hate the vampires. Tsukiko did wonder how he knew her name, though. That was her full name. My dear, you seemed pretty confused, a chilling voice said from the front of her cage. Tsukiko looked up at the older Nosferatu and growled at him. Alucard. What do you want? She growled, not liking him being there. Simple and to the point. I like that, he said, laughing in that dark way that was so much a part of him. Is it hard to understand that all I want to do is talk? It gets kind of lonely here. He let Tsukiko growl again and let out another laugh. I guess there was no reason to try to be funny. Tsukiko asks, why did you leave your little shell, vampire? She didn't like his presence at all. The man just shrugged and pretended not to notice the bijou while he looked at the silver gun in his hand. Little bastard, if I wasn't in this cage. What? Alucard laughed as he looked at the fox through his glasses and asked, you'd kill a dead man? Tsukiko scowled at how funny he was. What would you do if you did get out of the seal? Finish what I've started. My dear fox, the only way out is with a collar. Alucard laughed, it's going to be attached to a very fancy leash, but Naruto will hold it. Then what? No human being can control me. But what of a monster? Alucard asks, and the bijou was scared by the look in his eyes. What if he was so scary that even you were afraid of him? There is no such monster, was the calm, if growled, reply. Alucard had a laugh. No. It doesn't, he said, but his tone was hard to understand. But nothing is set in stone, not even death. Your monster could very well come to life. When that happens, will you dance with the devil or cower in your cage like a scared little girl? Alucard was gone before Tsukiko could strike back, even though it wouldn't have helped. The insult hurt her deeply. He had told her that she could either act like a scared human child or walk out to meet a demon who could very well be worse than the previous no-life king. She laughed at the idea and said, "I'm not afraid." She was the leader of the Bijou and the most dangerous person in the world. She had no worries. Alucard laughed as he closed the door to his little prison, already able to taste the end. It tasted good, and maybe the extra 21 years he had lived made it taste even better. He could already see what was going to happen, which made him very happy. The Dark One and Demoness couldn't see or feel how their master had changed, but he could. The soft turning of gears as the eye opened to see things that humans can't see. Nothing could describe how painful it is to be a vampire, and he knew that the two women couldn't even come close to what he felt. That would change, though. Everything would change after this battle. They would know about it. Like a clock. He laughed and told them, pure, exact, and covered in blood. Then he left them alone until he was needed for the last time. Kids grow up so quickly. Along with Sasaki. Aemi was happy, and for some reason that had nothing to do with the Uchiha who was gently rubbing her shoulders, that made him happy, too. Aemi said out of the blue, "I was really scared." She leaned her head back and rested it on Sasuke's shoulder. The Uchiha stopped and looked confusedly into the eyes of his partner. "When I went to the hospital for my regular checkup, the nurse told me I was pregnant. It was very frightening. Don't apologize. If it hadn't happened, you would have been a fading dream." She cut him off, turning her head to awkwardly kiss his cheek. "Don't worry, I'm not going away." "You have to stay with me," Sasuke said, trying to hide how uncomfortable this made him feel. "It came from somewhere else." "Until death do us part?" Aemi asked in a serious tone. Sasuke was surprised by the sudden change, and he couldn't for the life of him remember where he had heard that familiar line before. After a moment, Aemi saw that he was confused and gave him a soft smile. "You never really asked me to marry you, right?" Oh. Sasuke said with wide eyes. Now? Not right now. I'm really comfortable, and I'd hate to have to move so you could kneel before me," she sighed, leaning all the way back into him. "Just hold me and tell me you love me, and never let go." As his arms went around Akemi's waist, he said, with pleasure. His words were easy and comfortable. He gave her a light kiss on the neck and slowly leaned back until they were laying on the bed instead of sitting at the foot of it. "Aemi, I love you, and I'll never let go. You need to work on how the part about never letting go sounds, but still," she said, rolling over in his arms and kissing him playfully. "I also love you, Sasu-kun." Sasuke held her tightly and thought about what he and Tsunade had talked about the day he came back. "Think back." "Why?" yelled Sasuke. Itachi was angry because he wasn't going to be killed. Strangely enough, a part of him was happy that his brother would live, or at least keep living his unlife, or whatever he called it, but because we need him alive, both for information and for the upcoming war, Tsunade said. He was a trustworthy ninja who quit because of his own mistakes. He might have changed, but he won't do anything when Naruto is around. The angry reply was, he killed the whole clan, and he's getting away with it. No. He is helping with the war and will then go to jail to serve his sentence. We can't kill him, so he'll have to spend the rest of his life in prison, Tsunade said, explaining what she and the council had decided. He's dead already. Sasuke, I think you should watch how you sound, Tsunade said. I know that, but this should be treated like a mostly normal time in jail. Itachi and Naruto hide the fact that they are vampires for the same reason Kakashi hides his regenerator tattoos. They are true shinobi who value secrets. But Itachi. Tsunade said, Sasuke, I'd be more worried about people who can't protect themselves. Like, say, your fiancé. Sasuke was shocked by what she said and didn't know what she meant. He asked with some doubt, what does she have to do with this? She sighed and said, in some ways, everything. Orochimaru wouldn't mind killing her to get you to do what he wants. If he can use her, which is easy for him to do, he will do it right away. He could, for example, dress up as a strong ninja and kill her, making you want revenge and the power to get it. He will offer you that power, and you will probably take him up on it. He didn't know what to say for a long time. He knew that Shinobi didn't know what a fair fight was, but he couldn't imagine what it would take to kill a civilian. What? Came the slow answer. He didn't care if it seemed stupid. Tsunade sighed, and her face almost looked like that of a grandmother. She and the other civilians will be taken to safe houses when the fighting starts. Since Aemi is pregnant with a Uchiha child, she will probably be taken first. Even though it sounds bad, she may spend most of the Chunin exams in one of the safe houses. Sasaki was quiet for a moment after saying, "Is she safe where she is?" "Yes. I do get it." He asks, "When will she be told to leave?" "In less than a week." "In a week, people from the other villages will start to arrive, so only the Shinobi Council and I will know where she is. Once the fighting starts, the other civilians will join her, but we will have a plan to get them out of there as quickly as possible." The room was quiet for a long time. Before the younger Uchiha spoke, it seemed like an age had passed. "So, what am I supposed to do?" Tsunade replied. "Have faith. Have faith that Konoha will win, and that Aemi will be safe." Sasaki added, clenching his fists. "And that Naruto will see Orochimaru to the gates of hell." End of flashback. Sasaki wanted to hold his love in his arms for now. Then, at the last possible moment, he would put his trust in a monster just like his brother. He asked himself, trying to keep a light smile for Akemi's sake, or is it a completely different kind of monster? Is he really such a monster? Along with Hinata. It was a stupid thing to do and had no reason to happen. She was, for lack of a better word, stupid when she drank blood in front of her sister. Hanabi was too scared to even be in the same part of the house as Hinata, and Hinata was sorry about that. Hiyashi had told Hanabi what was going on as gently as he could, Hinata was told. She didn't think it helped. She said, "Stupid," and kicked her coffin. The wall got a dent. "That's great." She slammed the lid shut and sat down on it, letting her face fall into her hands. She had never been brave or done anything out of the ordinary, so she couldn't figure out why she wanted to drink blood in front of her sister. She asked herself, "What's wrong with me? Could it be being a vampire? Was it making her change? Did it also affect Naruto and Itachi?" "You're the same as you were before," a voice from the other side of the room said in response. Hinata's head snapped up when she heard a sound she knew. Her eyes could only see the mirror across the room. She didn't use chakra to call up the reflection, and it was sitting in a different place. "What's up?" Hinata blinked a few times, and when it didn't go away, she rubbed her eyes. She stood up slowly. The reflection did the same thing, but it did it more slowly and with an odd grace. "What? Are you?" She asked softly, not knowing what was going on. Did she fall asleep? "Oh, you're awake, then," the reflection said with a lazy, but predatory, smile. "And what else could I be other than you?" Hinata didn't say anything because she didn't know what to do with this reflection or whatever it was. "Come on, be what you are. Get the confidence of a vampire," it teased, always with a smile. Hinata asked with care, "What are you talking about?" "The same thing that let you drink in front of your sister, and that let you drink when you wanted to," it said. Hinata made a face. "I didn't feel like drinking. I'm not like that." She smiled and said, "Oh, yes, it is. I should already know. I never would have done that in the past." You used to be a shy little girl. You are now a Nosferatu. She is strong, quick, and smart. To these humans, she is a goddess. Of course you're getting brave enough to listen to what you want," said her double. Hinata yelled, "I would never want to drink in front of Hanabi," as she clenched her fist and dug her sharp nails into her palm. The cocky answer was, "But you did." Listen, I don't care who you are. Hinata was in the middle of a story when someone knocked on her door. Out of the blue, she turned around to face them. Hinata-sama, are things okay? From the other side of the door, a maid asked, I heard yelling. Hinata had to think for a moment before she realized she was waiting for an answer. Once she did, she calmed down and answered. I'm good. She told a lie. I just hit my toe on the dresser. As she spoke, she felt something other than air coming out of her mouth. Naruto had warned her about the power to suggest things. Okay, he said in a quiet voice, but Hinata couldn't tell if it was because of the door or the idea. Hinata turned back to the mirror and saw that her reflection was gone. In its place were her clothes, if not her. Without the chakra, all that was there was a shirt and pants that were floating. The smile and words of the double stayed with her, though. She turned the mirror around so it was facing the wall in case the reflection came back to bother her. As she walked back to her coffin and sat down, it did bother her. When she was a person, which seemed like a long time ago even though it had only been a few years, she was a shy little thing. She probably hadn't been happy with it, but she didn't know how to be more assertive or even what to do if she was. Part of her admitted that, if she had been brave enough, she might have caused trouble at the academy, whether she did it for attention or to get into trouble. She might have also been a more aggressive fighter. After her mother died, she was a little scared of death. When she was young, she thought that getting hurt meant dying, and she thought that brave people were the first to get hurt. She was expected to become a ninja, but if she had had a choice, she would have chosen not to. She might have liked it from the start if she had been braver. Would she have been like Sakura or Ino in some ways? Would she have gone after a boy she met? Part of her didn't agree. Something about boys had always turned her off. She did remember all of the girls. Hinata shut her eyes and let her face fall back into her hands. She couldn't say that being a vampire didn't make her strong and fast, but she wasn't ready to say that it made her brave. She was brave enough to change into someone she wasn't ready to be. She had enough courage to take what she wanted. Enough courage to be free. She said to herself, no. Not yet. She didn't want to think about freedom, which was like a bad dream that was far away. Even though Naruto's mind was far away and closed off, it was still a source of stability for her, and she didn't think she could stand on her own without it. He didn't offer help right away, and she could tell he was busy thinking about something important, but she remembered him saying that it's best to deal with personal problems one at a time. What was wrong with her? Being a vampire, being brave, and being gay seemed to be the three things in her life that were causing the most trouble, though the last one was kept a secret. Still, it was probably the easiest to start with, so she thought it might not be a bad place to begin. She was reminded that she only really remembered the girls at the academy growing up. The boys were there, of course, but she only really remembered the girls growing up. In a way, it was because she usually only sat near the girls, but she took a small leap of faith and decided to look at it as if she had always been gay. She thought that no man had really caught her eye over the years. Naruto did it in his own creepy and charming way, but she could tell something was wrong. It could have been his instincts telling him he was a different species, but even after he turned into a vampire, he still seemed wrong. The fact that a man almost raped her was certainly a factor. She was okay with a few of them, but when she walked too close to a man on the street, she still felt a little uneasy. Deep down, she did want close company, but when the other sex was cut off, the choice was pretty clear. I guess it wouldn't be so bad, no matter what other people think, she told herself. And worrying about being gay is a little bit easier than worrying about being a vampire. She chuckled. Small steps, in the end. She knew she should be training, though, because the Chunin exams were coming up soon. She agreed to Tsunade's plan, and even though she wasn't taking the exams, she still wanted to be at the top of her game for the fight, even though she wasn't a natural. Still, she would eventually have nothing to think about, and she was glad to have something to think about. She muttered, I'll deal with being a lesbian, being a vampire, and being brave first. Some people would find it very strange, but Hinata knew what the last item meant and was happy with the order she chose. She knew that she would have to make up with Hanabi at some point, which was easier said than done. She got up and opened her coffin. She thought that a few hours of sleep would be good for her. She went inside, pulled Moriko off the pillow, and hugged the stuffed animal to her chest before closing the lid. In the dark, she smiled at the stuffed wolf and let her eyes close. Naruto is there. Widabra asks, "What are you up to, wielder of mine?" As he walked down the stairs for the first time, she was surprised to see Naruto staring at a pair of candles in a competition. Puzzling out the secrets of unlife, was the answer that was muttered. Widabra went down the rest of the stairs and walked steadily across the room to sit down next to the vampire. She looked calm and interested. She had been with her lovers for a long time, and she began to wonder if she should have left him alone for so long. "Naruto, do you want to talk about something?" she asks. "Nothing." It was like that for a long time, but then it changed so quickly that the words almost didn't make sense. "How much does it cost to say your name?" When Widabra heard the words, she sighed. "If you say my name, I kill the person who said it," she calmly replied. "If you said that, I'd kill you and keep your soul. How I do it affects both the living and the dead." "Then it looks like you and I will be getting to know each other better soon," he said. "I don't think I'll be able to beat Orochimaru without your help. I'll call your fake name, and if that doesn't work, I'll call your real name." Widabra was quiet when the calm announcement was made. She wasn't sure if she wanted to talk about this. "Naruto. I'd rather you didn't," she said in a quieter voice than usual. "It looks like I'll die no matter what." He said, "I'd rather it be in your hands." He leaned over and gently kissed her in a rare moment that caught her off guard. Even in this form, Naruto could feel her poisonous saliva burning his lips, and she could feel his cold skin chilling hers. After a while, he stepped back. Widabra's hair was in her eyes, so it was hard to tell what she was thinking. "I have half then, don't I?" she asked in a whisper. She wanted it, but she didn't want to have to kill him so quickly after getting it. "You've always had half, in a way." Naruto looked back at the candles and said, "She'll get the other one and probably tear it to pieces. Make sure you don't let go." "Naruto, if I make myself older, will you hold me tonight?" she asks, her form flickering. He moved his head back and forth. "Not this time. When I figure out who I am, then I will," he said. As her shape came back together, Widabra seemed a little sad. Widabra repositioned herself on the coffin and said, "I guess you can't walk the line forever." After walking the line for years, she finally chose her side, and she was happy. Even though she sometimes felt bad about it, the good things about her life outweighed the bad. What will happen if she doesn't tear it up? What if we each have a half? Then my decision between being human or a monster will be the least of my worries, Naruto said, trying to be funny. Widabra laughed a little, even though she knew that the choice was bothering the vampire. You never know how things are going to turn out. If you expect the unexpected, something random will happen just to throw you off. Trust me, she shrugged. A moment later, she looked at her wielder out of the corner of her eye. Don't worry about it. What goes on, goes on. Naruto replied. Thank you, Widabra. He reached out and grabbed the candle that wasn't lit. He thought for a moment before using the other hand to light it. He said, you can't put out a fire with a match. But a bonfire will eat the match and get stronger because of its flame, Widabra said, not sure what he meant. He didn't start philosophical arguments just for fun very often. But the amused smile that spread across his face said a lot. Well, then, let's hope I'm not the one who lights the match in the coming fire. Naruto muttered, we meet again, old friend, as he put on his obsidian mask. He changed his shape to look like Alucard again because he thought it was more appropriate. Shadows wrapped around him and made the usual Ambu gear, to which he attached his pouch and Widabra's sheath. Time seemed to have gone by quickly. Before the officials and genin teams started showing up a week ago, the days seemed to run together. only Oto, Iwa, and Kumo showed up, and Naruto knew exactly who was on which side. Given how big Konoha was, they were only slightly outnumbered, but Naruto was sure that Orochimaru had a few nasty tricks up his sleeve. Jiraiya said that the snake had been tricky. Maybe he wouldn't be able to do all of those things if Naruto cut him in half, but he had been tricky so far. No matter what, he would try to kill it as soon as he could. Shadow walked into Tsunade's office after he shook his head to get rid of any distracting thoughts. Even though it felt good to be in total darkness for a moment, he missed the touch it gave him as he stepped into the light. "I see you're ready to go," Tsunade said as she put her robes over the Hokage's battle armor. "The second test will begin in 5 minutes." She told him, "You need to go over there and follow Sasuke." Naruto had known her long enough to know that her short and sweet orders were her way of dealing with stress. "Hi, Tsunade-sama," he said, and his eyes behind the mask began to glow. He was getting more and more excited. He could feel his heart beating faster and his blood moving faster through his veins. As the shadows surrounded him again, he felt his excitement growing. In many ways, it was to get ready for the battle that was coming up. He was interested in death, and the thought that it could be his own death only fueled the fire. He might have whispered to himself, "Should I not be afraid of dying?" As he climbed into a tree near Team 7's gate. "But I'm already dead, so what do I have to fear?" he said to the air in a mocking way. He thought for a moment about the people he thought of as his family and relatives. They were much more mortal than he was, and they might die today. He had both human and monster-like emotions running through him. When he heard the sound of a chain hitting the ground, he looked down and saw the team running into the forest. Sasuke was in front, but he seemed a little nervous. Tsunade had told Naruto about their short conversation, and Naruto couldn't say he was wrong. But if he didn't pay attention, even with Naruto's help, he probably wouldn't make it. As he stepped into the shadows and watched the group move, the shadows welcomed him. Staying between the worlds for any length of time was definitely hard. If he wanted to get ahead of the snake, he had to carry this weight, even if the snake never showed up. He was always on the lookout as Team 7 got into a few fights with 2 other teams. He didn't get involved in these small fights because he knew he was only here for Orochimaru and they didn't matter much to him anyway. Only the third fight, in which Team 7 stole a Heaven Scroll from the other team, caught his attention. Now, they just had to get to the tower. After a while, they started to whisper to each other about where to go. From what Naruto could hear, Shino wanted to rest and recover for about an hour, while the other 2 wanted to keep going and get to the tower as soon as possible, though Sasuke wanted to go much faster. Then, before Shino could explain why he was right, Naruto felt something change. Before he could do anything, which is saying a lot, a strong gust of wind tore through the forest, carrying Team 7 with it. He could, however, do something about the shadow that jumped along behind them. Naruto said to himself, "It's time to finish this," as he jumped off the branch and shot after the snake. The forest's constant dusk worked in his favor because it gave him enough cover to catch up quickly. From above, Orochimaru said, "It's great to see you again." Naruto moved to the left just in time to avoid the air bullet, while the clone he was chasing took the full blast and disappeared. The snake was about 40 feet up on a branch. "It looks like your reactions are faster in the dark." Naruto didn't waste any time being careful with his words. He rushed up to the Sannin and attacked with his claws. Orochimaru was surprised at how fast Naruto could move, which made the Nosferatu grin. "You didn't figure this out, did you?" he teased, stepping up his attack. But Orochimaru learned quickly and was able to easily avoid most of his moves. Naruto was a little off balance, so Orochimaru jumped back about 30 feet and threw several kunai at the vampire while he was off balance. Naruto didn't make a sound as his blood pushed the blades out of the wounds and stopped the bleeding. The quick healing seemed to scare Orochimaru a little bit. "That is very fast. I guess I'll have to take a sample after all," he said with a wicked grin as Naruto closed the distance. He stepped back to get out of the way, but Weedabra's blade caught him from behind. Before that shock could sink in, Naruto tore into the snake's neck and drank its blood. As he did this, he accidentally got rid of the clone. By the time he realized what he had done wrong, it was too late. The world turned upside down and warped, and fire rushed through his veins. Suddenly, he was in the middle of a barren field surrounded by a large group of seals. Before he could even get his teeth off the body, each seal started to shine. Naruto-kun, you look like you were surprised. I thought you were smarter than that, a familiar voice from the other side of the array teased. Orochimaru laughed as his chakra turned on the extra seals and made them rise up around the two in a dome shape. Didn't that seem too easy? As flames burned through Naruto's body, he asked, what was in the blood? He wasn't too surprised that Orochimaru knew who he was. Orochimaru had a laugh. Silver nitrate and a bit of garlic for good measure. A little trick I learned in the Akatsuki let me move the little meat puppet, and you went along with it, he laughed, holding up the Kusanagi. Didn't you think it was strange that I didn't use this or my snakes? You're losing your grip, vampire. Naruto yelled, son of a whore. As he tore Weedabra from the body and spat out as much blood as he could while Orochimaru laughed. Naruto looked down at Weedabra when he heard her groaning in pain. Her sword was slowly breaking up in the light, which was too strong for the darkness spirit, it seemed. He quickly put her back in her sheath, but he could feel that the sheath was also breaking. He didn't know what would happen if it went away completely. Naruto. I'm not sure how he made the light so strong, but I can't fight in it. I'm going to hide in your thoughts. If you call my name, this light will make my body disappear. You're on your own. Weedabra sobbed as her sword form was absorbed into Naruto's body. Your real name ought to be. The light is too bright, and there's nothing to start with to make a shadow. I apologize. Naruto closed his eyes and toughened himself up because he knew this was the start of a hellish fight. Oh, and try not to be distracted by the sounds of Konoha's destruction, Orochimaru said with a smile as an explosion went off in the distance. What? Naruto yelled as he turned around. As the Kusanagi cut across his back, he cursed himself for being so stupid. Orochimaru was already out of reach by the time he turned around. A little slow in the sunlight, aren't we? Orochimaru laughed. Naruto cursed and pulled out a kunai, not knowing how this fight would go. In Konoha. Hinata remembered one thing Iruka had said about ninja wars very clearly. He had said that the best way to win is to catch your opponent by surprise and use everything you have against them. It was one thing to hear about it in class, but it was a whole different thing to see it happen. Most of Konoha was shaken by an explosion that came out of nowhere. If she wasn't mistaken, it came from the east side of Konoha. Almost everyone was caught off guard, but her father was the only one to act right away. He told the ninja to fight, and he told the civilians to go into the bunkers below the compound. So, she went with her father because she didn't know what else to do. She felt a little naked without Moriko, but the fact that the plushie was safe in her coffin gave her some comfort. Evening, Hiyashi-san, a smooth voice next to Hinata said. A lot of people looked over and saw Itachi running with the young Hyuga. If it's all right, I need to borrow Hinata. You don't want her to be angry near your family, right? Hiyashi gave both Itachi and his daughter a grim nod. It hurt a little to see that nod, but she knew that sticking with Itachi was the better choice. They split off, jumped over the walls of the compound, and ran toward the fighting. Hinata asks, any advice? As she looked around. It surprised her a bit to see Itachi light up a cigarette. The thing that caught her eye, though, was the dagger in his hand. It was a very strange and evil thing. If they're not with us, they'll be with the dead, he said in response. Your orders won't let you directly kill a Konoha ninja, but try not to get too angry. She said, all right, trying to prepare herself for the fight. She could now see the ninja and smell the smoke. Is there more? Don't play around with your food. The Uchiha was gone in an instant, leaving behind only the glow trail from his cigarette. Hinata almost felt sorry for the enemy ninja as they sped toward the trail in question. But something excited her in the pit of her stomach, which caught her by surprise. It was too much, just like the smell of blood that was now everywhere. As she got closer, she started to see red, and her movements became more natural, as if she wasn't thinking about what she was doing. She was pelted with shuriken, and as she moved through the storm, an invisible hand led her. She grabbed a bigger shuriken out of the air and threw it back when she saw something she wouldn't have before. Her vampire strength and speed gave the blade more force and spin. As it tore through the ninja, she gave a wicked grin. She knew she should have been disgusted by what was happening, but she couldn't stop feeling this strange excitement. She finally got close enough to fight and used a twisted version of the Juken to attack with her claws. She saw the glow trail move quickly through a group of ninja, darting here and there as cuts and wounds followed close behind. A painful shock woke her up and brought her face to face with a Kumo ninja who had been stupid enough to get close to her. Hinata let out an angry howl, and before the woman could move away, she tore the woman's arm off and sank her fangs into her throat. When she saw the blood, she had a horrifying moment of clarity. She could feel the pain and fear of everything around her, especially the woman. She couldn't stop drinking, and as she drank in the kunoichi's soul, every second felt like an eternity of terror. Then she felt something like numbness as the dead body fell from her fangs. Her body was filled with strength, and the fire in her crimson eyes seemed to show a strong will. She started walking before the numbness was completely gone, but she moved much faster and more gracefully than she had expected. Since she changed, she had been cold, but now she felt warm. She liked it, too. Itachi laughed as the Hyuga went on her own little rampage. It was his job to calm her down if she got angry, not to stop a mass killing. She was moving slower than him, but he didn't think she'd catch up anytime soon. Between his training and the full stomach of blood he'd given himself for the battle, he was moving at what most ninja would call breakneck speeds. The only way to find him was to follow the red trail, and even then, he always moved slowly and in unpredictable ways, making it impossible to get back at him. Waves of kunai, shuriken, and jutsu came at him, but they didn't hurt him. He made sure to keep licking the dagger clean between killings. It didn't make up for the blood burn completely, but it kept him going until he had to drink. From the other side of a row of buildings came a familiar cry and the sound of birds chirping, which made the vampire grin. Kami said that no one on his team could be sneaky. Even though Kakashi didn't like to fight, he had to admit he was good at it. With allies nearby, it was easier to use the Sharingan to avoid a jutsu or stop a genjutsu. The Chidori tore through ranks at once, but there were always more ninja where others fell. Even though it hurt him to see so many of his allies die, he kept his mind on the next wave. This was his home, and he wasn't going to lose it just so he could have a pity party. Akemi is there. Akemi told a mother who was trying to calm her child, "It'll be okay." The redhead was surprised at how quickly the civilians had been moved to shelters. In almost half an hour, everyone who wasn't a shinobi was in a shelter. She had mostly been showing the new people where everything was and telling them to be as quiet as she was. It had been a bit of a pain, but it wasn't as bad as having to get drunk people to stop talking. She was a little annoyed that she had been sent here early because she was pregnant with a Uchiha child. Still, she tried to use her experience to make sure no one was rushing around looking for something. She moved to the back of the shelter, sighed, and felt helpless all of a sudden. She knew that leaving the shelter would almost certainly kill her, but she wanted to know what was going on outside. Explosions and shouting could be heard through the walls, and she couldn't help but think about the man she was about to marry. He was proud of his skills, but she knew that there were many ninja outside who were stronger than him and that it was. She shook her head and tried to stay in the moment. 2 young kids were fighting, so she told them to stop. Akemi knew that these thoughts were not helpful and shouldn't be had at this time. Still, her heart went out as she tried to find a way to find out if Sasuke was okay. With Group 7. The wind had thrown the team off, but when they landed in the middle of a battle, they had no choice but to grit their teeth and start fighting. From what the auto ninja said and did, it was clear that something was very wrong. They didn't talk about the war until a bomb went off and shook the ground. The fight was even until Shino used his bugs to kill the one with modified arms. Sakura used a genjutsu to hold one of the others still long enough for Sasuke to kill him with a fire jutsu that also burned the last one left standing. Shino's kunai also put an end to that. With the sound of battle on the horizon and the fear of dying dulled by adrenaline, they ran straight toward the fighting, determined to fight for their home. "Please. Stay safe, Akemi," Sasuke begged in his mind, as the Sharingan turned. He now had someone to look out for, and he wouldn't let anything bad happen to her. Naruto is there. Taking everything into account, he couldn't believe he wasn't dead at this point. The silver nitrate had stopped his regeneration completely, and even though he didn't know what the garlic did, he knew it wasn't making his situation better. "You're out of shape," Orochimaru teased as he held up the Kusanagi. The blade was covered in Naruto's blood, which had some silver streaks in it. "When are you going to stop talking?" Naruto huffed, trying to ignore the pain from the cuts all over his body. The only part of his armor that was still in good shape was his pants. "Pardon my habit. I got used to talking to dead people while I cut them up," Orochimaru joked in a tone that was almost sorry. Naruto narrowed his eyes and tried hard not to go berserk. If he did, he would have to change into shadow form and dissolve in the light. Kunai weren't doing much against the Kusanagi, but since he was only as strong as a human in the light, he knew it was better than testing his claws. He took another out of his pouch, knowing that there were not many left. As the vampire charged, Orochimaru said, "I have to wonder why you aren't using jutsu." The vampire dodged the blow. He was brave enough to say that this battle was funny. Naruto yelled, "Shut up," as he tried to fight off his urge to go berserk. But he wouldn't say that he was afraid of going crazy. Voices that he thought he had shut down were back and trying to get him to do something. "Could it be that the light is messing with your chakra?" Orochimaru asked as he cut another gash in Naruto's left arm as they fought. "Or did a certain Nightwalker never learn anything?" "Be quiet." Naruto snarled and lashed out with his claws in a fit of sudden anger. Orochimaru laughed at the poor shape of the vampire and cut the hand twice with his sword before jumping out of the way. The vampire's slow movements and worsening mental state showed that there was a lot of poison in his veins. Orochimaru was proud of himself for making a good poison. He was pretty proud of himself, since it was based on myths and legends. On top of that, the invasion was going as planned, and he could tell from the smoke that the giant snake summoning had worked. He couldn't go look for the snake himself because of how far away it was, but his minions had sent him the results via radio. Konoha was making less and less progress. He thought about killing the vampire in front of him, but he knew better than to kill someone and then walk away from the dead body. He knew exactly what he had to do to make sure that Naruto wouldn't get in the way of any future plans. This information had taken him years to put together. Taunt him until he goes berserk and takes on the shadow form that the light will eat. From the way the vampire moved, I could tell he was getting close. A few more cuts and low blows would be enough. "Do you want to take a break?" "I've got all day." Konoha. "Not so much," he teased, making like he was using Kusanagi's point to clean his nails. "Fucking snake," Naruto muttered as he felt sick to his stomach. He stopped the world from moving, roared, and charged with a kunai in his hand. He tried to hit Orochimaru in the middle, but was stopped. He turned around and tried another cut, but it didn't work any better. The light made him move so slowly and burned him the whole time. He didn't think he would notice if he really did go to hell during this fight. It might even be more fun without the snake. Kill them. Tear down. Saying, drink. Maim. Rape. Kill, kill, kill. The voices kept getting louder, and his slashes got more and more desperate as he tried to land any blow that would make blood come out. As he went, a red tint covered his vision, and he cut straight for Orochimaru's throat. Orochimaru thought about cutting off the arm, but he didn't want to have to keep an eye on it in case Naruto had any tricks up his sleeve. He was pretty sure that the sunlight would stop such things, but in the wonderful world of ninjas, he should have known better. He thought it would be best to move out of the way and then throw a kunai into the back of the vampire from the other side of the ring. The result was a loud roar of "motherfucker" and a long string of snarled gibberish. Orochimaru smiled because he knew the end was near. With a few more cuts, the vampire would turn into a berserker and die. Orochimaru said as if they were having a casual conversation, "You know, it's almost like you were trying to save the village. It's sad to think about. How could a monster ever hope to save people?" "Shut up," was the growled reply. "Tell me, does that make the loss hurt even more?" "That is, this little trick. You've been trying to tell yourself that you can turn into a human at any time," Orochimaru said. "Did you do it so you could trick yourself into thinking you could go see your daughter by another man?" He asked, "Didn't you kill her mother?" And then shrugged. "Well, I guess I'll have to find her. I would like to know what a Damphir can do. Isn't that the right word? Aren't they half human and half vampire? Even sounds like the word, damned. It's kind of funny to think that it means she's been cursed since birth," Orochimaru said. The fiery eyes of the vampire across from him were like gears turning. Naruto ran as fast as he could because he wanted to tear the snake man to pieces. The voices were getting louder, and the pain from all the cuts was getting worse. He cut with a kunai in one hand and claws in the other. Orochimaru knocked the vampire's kunai out of his hand and punched him away. "I really hope your daughter fights harder. If not, I'm sure I could find that Hyuga you turned and have her make a few more Damphirs for me," Orochimaru said, knowing that it would be the last piece of the puzzle. "Wasn't it your fault that she almost got raped and killed? Fucks you." Orochimaru suddenly felt a pressure that he had only felt before when he got too close to a bijou. At the same time, it was much darker, like a berserker vampire. Now, he just had to wait for the light to do its job. Naruto's shape changed and lost its physical form, becoming red shadows. As he turned, the light burned him and quickly broke down his shape. Orochimaru watched as the light that was eating away at the mass seemed to stop it from moving. It was taking as long as he thought, and soon there would be nothing left but a puddle of darkness. It stopped all of a sudden, making the Sannin stop. Inside Naruto's head, Alucard muttered, "It is time," as he heard the sound of stone breaking. No matter where you were in the castle, you could hear it. Soon after, he let out a roar of anger and hate, which startled the older vampire for a moment. However, a wicked grin soon spread across his face. Alucard stood up and spread his arms. He heard the banging on the iron door as a sign that it was time for him to go to the afterlife. Even though he didn't know what shape it would take or how quickly it would happen, he was looking forward to it. The beating got louder, and he could see that the door was getting dinged up. As the door was finally blown off its hinges, he taunted, "Come get me, you monster." Inside, there was a lot of darkness, and hundreds of long claws flew through the air toward the vampire. He let them in, but they grabbed him and dragged him out of the room, even though they already knew where they were taking him. He saw a claw fly down the hall and turn into thousands of them in the dark. Almost, he wondered what the angry vampire was thinking. The claws flew through the hallway like a wild animal, smashing into the walls and destroying what was once the hall. As the darkness moved, it left behind thousands of claws that tore at the walls and ceiling, leaving no stone untouched on whatever evil mission they were on. The main cloud twisted and turned through the darkness, eating the torches as it dove deeper into the dungeon. Even though the dark whispers that went through the vampire's mind and echoed from the dark walls were the first sign that something was very wrong, the roar of the stone told her that something was very wrong. She was shocked by the beast's roar because she had never heard a beast make such a bloodthirsty sound before. Then they showed up. It was a wall of claws that could only be seen in the darkness from which they came because of their red color. She was surprised when they tore up the cage, ignoring the seal as they tore the bars apart and went straight for the Kyuubi. Tsukiko tried to hit them away with her claws and tail, but the claws split and grabbed her 1,000 times, and she could smell blood as she was pulled out of her cage. Normally, she would have been glad to get away, but this was very strange, and the claws smelled like blood. They didn't care that she tried to fight back. They pulled her up through the tunnel that the claws had torn all to hell, ripping her from every place she tried to hold on. She was dragged by her tails and had to watch as darkness filled the hallway leading to her cage. For once, she wished she was behind bars instead of in the iron grip of the 1,000 shadowy claws, which felt like liquid. She had never been this far away from her cage before. From her cage, she could only see the stairs leading up to the first curve. Tsukiko tried to fight, but she couldn't because the claws were twice as fast because of the momentary lapse. The closer they got to whatever evil force was making them do what it was doing, the more Tsukiko wanted to go back. It was exciting, but she had never been in a fight with someone she couldn't beat. She was finally thrown out of the cloud into an open space with a lot of force. She was able to flip in the air and land on her feet, but the sight of her landing pad, a small rock floating above a sea of blood, wasn't very comforting. Still, for her size, she was very graceful and landed perfectly on the rock, which was just barely big enough for her. She yelled, "Where am I?" but got no answer at first. It was like the room was filled with pure darkness, but she could still see. It was so confusing that it seemed like her mind wouldn't let her figure out what was going on. An angry scream came from her right, which made some of the darkness go away. Tsukiko saw that she had been thrown from the left corridor and was now on the right side of the huge room. The scream came from the right corridor, where a writhing mass of shadow claws soon spat out a small figure onto a rock a little to the right of where Tsukiko was sitting. Widabra yelled, "What the hell?" He was pretty mad. She was still getting better from the sunburn when the shadows came into her room. They had ripped her out of bed, much to the anger of her lovers, and carried her down the hallway to the throne room. Wait, what the hell just happened here? It was completely broken. The floor was gone and the walls were cracked. They were floating on two pieces of what looked like the floor. Below them, a sea of blood churned in a gory tide. "Damn it, what did you do?" Widabra yelled at Tsukiko as he looked at her. "What did I do? I thought you were making the shadows." She yelled back. "I can't control them, so how in the hell could it be me?" Tsukiko wasn't sure if the spirit had ever been this angry before. Before she could say anything about how the evil aura made her powers weaker, a dark laugh rang through the room above the roar of blood below. Both of them looked over and saw Naruto standing on the back of this throne, which floated in the air like their rocks. Even though he was different, it seemed like he hadn't changed at all. His hair, which used to be a beautiful silver color, was now a dark red color, as if it had been stained with fresh blood. It looked even scarier because it was flailing around wildly in the air above Naruto as he laughed hysterically. Nosferatu wasn't wearing a shirt, but he did have a pair of black pants on. His skin looked paler than usual, and his eyes burned with a fire that neither Spirit nor Bijou had seen before. Widabra took a chance and asked, "Naruto, what's going on?" Her answer came from up above. "He's taking his place in line," Alucard said as he floated above on what looked like a crucifix. "He's turning into a real Nosferatu." Widabra and Tsukiko, who were sensitive to the ebb and flow of energy, could see that Alucard was losing his very existence while Naruto drank it in and became more and more. There. Widabra couldn't explain it, but it seemed like Naruto's presence got heavier and harder to breathe with every second that passed. At the same time, it had a sharp edge that sent shivers down her spine. Such a glorious moment, isn't it? Naruto laughed, causing a few more stones to fall into the water below. Widabra and Tsukiko took another chance and looked down. They saw that at least 200 people were drowning in the ocean of blood below them, while they floated above. "What's going on?" growled Tsukiko, whose tails were flailing. She made sure they were far away from the evil water below. The way Naruto looked at her made her feel cold all over. A moment. A moment. Naruto said again and again. After a moment, he started laughing again and threw his head back. When Widabra yelled, "Naruto!" the vampire stopped moving. She saw the last bit of Alucard's energy flow into Naruto, and the old no-life king just stopped being. She tried to stay calm as she asked, "What's going on?" Just then, the voices stopped. Such a glorious moment. Naruto said it again, but this time with a much more refined and controlled laugh. "We should be happy about." "What is he going on about, spirit?" Tsukiko asked Widabra. She was shocked to see that the darkness spirit was afraid. "Please, Naruto." "I don't," she began. "Alright, a song and a dance will do. And a lot of drinking," he said, finally lifting his head. She had never seen anything like the crimson glow in his eyes before. Tsukiko was looking into the eyes of a real predator. A hand that couldn't be seen pulled the rocks closer to Naruto's overturned throne. Naruto reached out his hand to Widabra, grinning evilly. The other was headed toward Tsukiko, which surprised the bijou. She still felt like this power, whatever it was keeping her powers in check, or maybe the seal was still in place somewhere. She didn't know what to do. Tsukiko looked to see what Widabra was doing, if only to get a hint. She was surprised to see the young girl without clothes leave. In her place was a full-grown woman who was about the same height as Naruto. Her skin was as white as snow, and her hair was the same color as the girl's, but it fell to the back of her knees. Even though she was wearing a black dress, it was easy to see her impressive bust and figure. The most shocking things about her were the twin horns on either side of her head that pointed forward and the acid-green eyes that looked at the Nosferatu with a sad look. Tsukiko saw that the back of the dress had a long tail that looked like a lizard's. The tail was at least as long as the woman was tall. "You know the price," the woman said in a sad voice. Her words were like a beautiful song. The words were like acid to Tsukiko's ears. Tsukiko snarled, "What is he doing?" Because she was sick of being ignored. Naruto said, "Come, sing for me, Tsukiko." He turned back to Widabra and smiled at her. "I will not do such. Dance, you Aben queen." The words made everything quiet. Tsukiko could feel everything move as Widabra started to give off a shadowy glow. The raw strength was amazing. Naruto turned his head to look at Tsukiko as the black aura around his left forearm and hand grew stronger. When he smiled at Tsukiko, his sharp teeth almost scared her. She knew what was going to happen. She would change into Widabra, a spirit that serves as a weapon for its master. She was surprised that Naruto already knew the words to a song she thought was impossible for him to know. "Sing, you Silver Queen." She was surprised by the name, but she felt like something clicked into place. As she thought about this name, the level of power known as Kyuubi seemed to fall away from her. Blood-stained fur shone silver and had the color of the hunter's moon. She couldn't stop her aura from coming out, so it did. As it gathered around his right arm, it was scary and exciting at the same time. She thought. A lot of force. "Come, see the world through my eyes." Naruto called out with a wicked grin. At the same time, the world went black and turned bright white. After what seemed like a split second, Tsukiko could see it again. She saw a pale human standing in front of her in a dome that was lit up. The light was annoying, but it could slow her down. As a bijou, her pride wouldn't let her do it. The man, who looked like a snake, was surprised to see her there, but her body was moving on its own. She stopped for a moment and then realized it wasn't her body. When Naruto was berserking, she could feel what the world was like through him. But through what felt like her own right arm, there was a whole new level of connection. He raised both arms and held out two war talons. She felt like she was looking through a mirror when she saw the silver one on his right arm. The midnight black mirror image on her left arm reminded her of Widabra, and all of a sudden, she could feel the spirit's presence, as if she were standing next to her. She looked sad, but there was also something about her that made her seem angry. The human spat out words that the vampire couldn't understand, and so neither could Tsukiko. For a moment, Tsukiko felt her muscles tighten, and then they were gone. She almost laughed with joy at the thought of getting a kill. The person was good, but now he was afraid. The grass sword blocked a lot of blows, but when it cut along their arm, a hellhound of blood jumped out, and the light didn't affect it. It bit down on the blade and broke it in half. Tsukiko thought it was very strange to have a creature made of her own blood that was violent and hungry for blood. The human moved quickly away, but the dog jumped up from the wound and followed him, always feeling connected by what she thought was the tail. They came soon after the hound, and Tsukiko felt the same wicked joy and excitement that her two body-mates had. The broken blade foolishly cut the vampire 2 more times, releasing a flood of blood that flooded the ground and rushed toward the man, trying to pierce him with sharp spikes. This is existence. This is the life of a hunter. She yelled, knowing that only Widabra and Naruto could hear her. To her surprise, Widabra was the one that made people agree. If there had been time, Tsukiko might have thought about why. The way things were, a snake was running for its life. Now that its trap wasn't working, it ran through the wall that had been keeping the Nosferatu inside. As they flew through the barrier, Tsukiko felt a slight burn, but it went away right away. Then she really felt how powerful Widabra was. They called on every shadow in the area to attack. As the snakes tried to get away, thousand-eyed beasts blocked their path, mixing blood with shadows as their power grew. The man tried to do the fast motion jump again, but Widabra called on the man's own shadow to rip off his arm, which only took a moment to get the man's attention. The search was done. As her gauntlet went into the snake man's chest, Tsukiko felt a wave of almost orgasmic pleasure wash over her. Widabra didn't moan, but Tsukiko could feel the pleasure that touched the darkness spirit. Then they both felt a shake. They felt their mouth open wide, and a second later, it ripped into Orochimaru's throat. Both of them felt pain and fear, which made them scream as pain, fear, memories, and feelings that were not their own came at them. They saw labs and dead bodies, felt betrayed and angry beyond measure, and saw their own lives flash before them. They were hit by a wave of refreshing power, but it didn't make up for the trauma they had been through. Tsukiko and Widabra realized, with a mix of shock and disgust, that Naruto felt this way every time he drank. He felt all of it. And he was still hungry. As he sent the body running toward Konoha, the shadows in the forest answered his call. His desire for blood was scary. Widabra tried to break the connection, but they couldn't because their body was moving faster than a person could ever imagine. Tsukiko was scared to be here for some reason. She tried to pull and push, but it didn't help, and their vision started to clear. They didn't know which was scarier. The fact that Naruto wanted to feel even more pain, or the fact that he was no longer a berserker but still wanted to tear through the enemy. It went. A monster. The character Naruto. He could feel that they didn't like him, but he didn't care. Instead, he focused on charging into the fight. He was drawn to the smell of blood and death. The gauntlets on his arms made him happy because they showed who he was now. They had fingers with claws and blades along the outside of his forearms. Widabra was elegant in a way that was very sharp and crooked, while Tsukiko was elegant in a way that was more smooth and flowing. He thought it meant he had to tear his enemies apart with his hands, his strength, and the women he loved. As he got closer, shadows rushed after him, and the skies seemed to get cloudy. It was almost as if the sun couldn't stand to look at him. The idea appealed to him. He had been on the line for too long. He chose his side, and he felt great about it. Orochimaru's soul had already been taken away by the waves of blood and pain in him, so his power went to help the beast that was now charging towards Konoha. When he saw his first target, the blood on his face made him smile in a way that didn't seem right. There were a lot of Kumo and Iwa ninja in the clearing. They were probably to blame for the big snake-off in the distance. He broke through a few of them and tore them apart with his claws and teeth before letting the shadowy wave eat them. Black spears came out and stuck a few of them, while their blood turned into hellish beasts that tore at the others. Naruto jumped at one of the ninja and cut her head right off. He laughed in the rain of blood as he jumped at another and tore his throat out, drinking as he ran toward more ninja. His shadow and hounds ate what he didn't eat, giving him power boost after power boost, each one coming with a wave of agony and pain that wasn't his. He knew that his weapons made him feel bad, and he liked that feeling. He was a monster, and there was no point in trying to hide it. As he got closer to the snake, Naruto laughed and gave it a sly grin as he used the snake's own shadow to spear it to the ground. He jumped up and landed on its head as his shadow tsunami hit the wall of Konoha and the snake. He stuck Tsukiko into the snake's head and ran forward, ripping its head open. The other head screamed in pain as the shadow started to cut it and its own blood boiled and tore its vein apart. Naruto jumped off the nose of the first head and cut the second one in half with a blade made of bloody shadows. He let himself fall for a while and tried to hit a building nearby. The shadows scared the Konoha ninja, but they didn't hurt them. Instead, they went after any other ninja they saw. As he bounced off a building, he yelled in joy, "It's amazing." He could feel every shadow and heartbeat in Konoha. As its master dove into the fight, the wave began to circle around Konoha's wall. The Kumo Junin didn't know what hit him when Naruto crashed into him and cut him up with Widabra. Tsukiko stabbed one of the Kumo Junin's allies and pulled her over to be drained. The Junin's blood mixed with the shadows of the shreds to make two hellhounds, which attacked the nearby ninja. He could feel the fear that people who saw him had. The Konoha ninja didn't attack because he only killed the Iwa and Kumo ninjas, but he could feel their disgust. Even though they were people, he didn't care about them. They did not get it. He ran down the street like a crazy person, laughing as he hurt anyone who wasn't wearing a Konoha headband. As he used Tsukiko and Widabra as weapons of war, he could feel the mix of pleasure and disgust on their faces. He was hit by a big fireball that came hurtling down the street. He had no fear of fire, so he let it hit him. It was warm, and the shockwave made my skin tingle, but it wasn't a big deal. It tore his body to pieces, but his blood kept him together until the smoke's shadows let him get back together. From the look on the Auto Ninja's face, it looks like he didn't expect a vampire to come flying out of the smoke cloud and rip his throat out. He got more blood in another soul, and then more as hellhounds and shadows started to do what they were told inside the walls. He thought it was great to be in a sea of fear and pain. Naruto? A familiar voice axe. This got his attention just as he swung his sword and cut off the head of another ninja. His eyes went to Itachi, who was standing in the middle of a group of people and was close to a slightly shaking Hinata. Said Hyuga was shocked to see her master in such a bad shape. His blood-soaked hair twisted and turned in a wind that wasn't there, but seemed to go into the shadows when it could. His face was covered in blood, and he was only wearing a pair of ragged ninja pants and a pair of gauntlets. Naruto yelled, "Good hunting, brother."
As a greeting, then turned and ran away to keep killing a lot of people.
She asked, shaking, "Itachi-san. What was wrong with Naruto-kun?" She got over her anger a few minutes ago, maybe because she was tired, and then she thought about what she had done. It didn't help that her master was covered in blood and seemed eager to spill more. She wasn't sure if she had ever seen someone with eyes that crazy before. Itachi tightened his grip on his knife and said, "That would be the no-life king." He could tell that something important was going to happen. This place is about to get weird. Hinata wasn't sure if she wanted Itachi to explain or not. Something that could make the Uchiha nervous was certainly something scary.
The crazy laughter that seemed to come from every direction in Konoha didn't help.
Naruto could tell that the shadow wave had gone all the way around the wall of Konoha, so he decided to hunt humans as a grand finale. He smashed through one ninja after another on his way to the top of the pole in the town square. A Kumo shinobi tried to kill him with a Raiden jutsu, but it didn't have much of an effect on Naruto, even though it hit him. On the other hand, the ninja found that Tsukiko was very good at cutting him in half. As he got closer, a few more shinobi and kunoichi got in his way, which made him smile even more. Their shadows nailed their feet to the ground, which scared them for the split second it took him to close the distance and use Tsukiko and Weedabra to cut most of them in half. As he leapt forward toward the pole, hellhounds made from their own blood ate their bodies. As he went by, he cut off the head of another Oto kunoichi. He then jumped into the air and landed gracefully on the pole. Naruto used the grace and strategy he learned from a once-in-a-lifetime situation to make the three of them work better together. He also used Tsukiko's chakra and Weedabra's shadows at the same time. The waves started to rise around the wall, slowly enveloping Konoha and filling it with bloody shadows. They turned off the lights and muted the sounds they touched, leaving the people inside blind, deaf, and speechless. Naruto said the name of the technique just before it hit him. Everyone in Konoha heard his whisper because it broke the silence. Aria of the Night Without a Moon. As soon as Itachi heard the words, he knew it. Naruto was one with the darkness. He was everywhere and nowhere at the same time, and the world was quiet as he led the assassin's orchestra. An aria sung by Konoha's best killer, he thought as Hinata grabbed his arm to let him know she was there. He didn't really listen. The only thing assassins can say is words. Nothing. Silence rules in the dark. This is the aria of the Moonless Night, my friend. Itachi could feel the number of deaths going up. Naruto was everywhere. He killed everyone, drank their blood, or just killed them. Itachi could tell how many people the Nosferatu was killing by how strong the aura got. He would be surprised if no Konoha ninja died during the song, but he didn't know how well Naruto could control himself with that much power. Then, it took place. The silence ended all of a sudden, and the shadows rose up in a whirlwind of wings. As it moved toward the Hokage monument, it spiraled up into the sky, drawing the attention of every ninja in the village. There, on top of the mountain, the group spiraled into a point with what seemed to be an infinite number of people. People in the village gasped and screamed in fear as waves of blood rushed toward the mountain and then went up its face. When the blood and bats met in the middle, they made a creature that looked like a person. When the last bat and drop fell, a monster stood up. He was 7 feet 9 inches tall and had long, crimson hair with silver streaks that wove wildly through the waves. His bright red eyes shone from a sharp, ashen-skinned face. His clothes were mostly red and silver, with some black, a tunic, a trenchcoat, trousers, and boots. On his hips were 2 katanas, one with a black sheath and the other with a crimson sheath with silver designs. He looked over the village, knowing that all of his enemies were dead and boosting his own strength. It boiled behind locked doors that he couldn't open even with his iron will. He felt anger, pain, pity, sorrow, and some joy. Hundreds of people looked up at him standing there and shuddered. Naruto turned and walked away, knowing that he was now the monster of Konoha and that he no longer walked the line. He was Nosferatu, the no-life king. He didn't have to worry about being human, because he was himself and nothing more. For now, though, his death was waiting for him, and he didn't want to be late. After that, Naruto sighed as he sat on the bed on the top floor of the Namikaze mansion. His shadows told him that Konoha was getting better in record time. His Aria had killed all of the enemies, and now they were taking advantage of that. Tsunade had tried to send Itachi to get Naruto so she could talk to him, but the Uchiha refused. The moonlight came in through the big doorway that led to the balcony. Naruto sat there in just his pants, letting the moonlight hit his skin. Itachi was smart to stay away. He felt arms wrap around his middle, and a set of large breasts pressed into his back. A chin rested on his left shoulder. Naruto finally said, "I guess there are worse ways to die." When he looked over, Weedabra's eyes were locked on him, but he could see her smirk. You're already dead, she whispered, her cheeks turning red as she slid one hand under his waist. For some reason, her voice was more normal. But you still have to give me a life. That's the price. The vampire was surprised because he thought he was going to die, but Weedabra's older form, which could be called her true form, told him that he had to get her pregnant because she couldn't kill him or didn't want to kill him. I thought you said it worked on the dead, he said, trying to keep a straight face while she held on to him. Act like I'm lying, she replied. You will become my lover right now. But until you die, I will marry you. That's the word for a person, right? She asks, beginning to move steadily. Why? He asks, somewhat confused. I could feel how disgusted you were when you. Another voice said from the other side of the room, you're a monster. Naruto looked over and saw a tall woman leaning against the bedpost. She was about the same height as him and Weedabra. She had long, flowing red hair and deep, ruby eyes. Her skin was fair and smooth, but he saw several marks on her naked body. 9 tails came from her tailbone, and she had fox ears instead of normal ears. What about Tsukiko? He asks, shocked. She crawled over the bed in the body that looked like a human to sit next to the vampire. You are a monster that scares us, she said over and over again, her face turning red. A predator of the highest tier. As a result, our instincts tell us that you are the best friend we can find here. Weedabra whispered in his ear, congratulations. She seemed very happy. Gut feelings? I used to be a dragon, Weedabra said with a smirk. But tonight, let's dance with Satan. You are the scariest, most dangerous monster around. That means you get the biggest, meanest women. Naruto laughed, and his fangs sparkled next to his eyes. And that's it? You hated me 12 hours ago, but now you want children? He asked Tsukiko, who had started to move closer to him. She gave a soft growl. You're the most powerful man I've ever met. Even though I don't like you, you'll give me the best kits you can. So I'll put up with you, she said, trying to keep up the growl. Instincts, Naruto said, rolling his eyes. Can't be ignored. You know, normally I would argue. But what do you know? Fuck it, he said with a smile. The village was safe, he was alive, and 2 hot women were trying to get it on with him. Don't think you'll have much time to sleep. I've been trying for years to fuck you. Weedabra's growl was deeper than Tsukiko's, and she looked at the foxwoman and asked, would you like to join us? Be careful, spirit. Naruto knew there would be repercussions later, but he was too tired to care. He had killed his target, and he didn't mind that the next 2 were sleeping with him. Also, there would be more time to kill later, on nights that were not good for love but were good for singing and dancing.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.